I am always chasing the feeling of finding that perfect book for you, of finding exactly what you're looking for. So I wanted to help you guys find that experience, so I asked you on my Instagram to send me your highly specific book requests, and then I will recommend a book that fits that request. Hello, my name is Leonie. Thanks for being here again. If you're new here, welcome. So I made a similar video like this about a year ago, but I thought that it would be very fitting for the holiday season because a video like this might help you find that perfect gift for someone in your life, or maybe you get some ideas for books to put on your own wish list. Let's just hop in immediately. The first request is a book for my gamer boyfriend. And the book that I immediately thought of for this was All Systems Red, or just the entire Murderbot series by Martha Wells, because this is from the first person perspective of a robot, like a sci-fi robot in space. Reading this book almost felt like being in a first-person shooter game. It's very funny and not very long, so I think it's great to get someone into reading. The great thing about this book is that the main character, although being a robot, is made to be kind of relatable, and you kind of start sympathizing with him. I think this is great for anyone who has a gaming partner. General. A small book for the burnout student that wants to read but feels bad for wasting time. I think a lot of people can relate to this. I sometimes relate to this, and I have a perfect book for this that I should probably reread. It's my favorite book of all time. I've recommended it plenty of times. It is The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. Explains the ideas of Taoism through Winnie the Pooh, because apparently Pooh Bear is the embodiment of Taoism. So it goes over themes of simplicity and letting go and just going with the flow. And not only is this a short read, so you can get through it quickly, it will also help you feel like you're not wasting time for reading a book. A gift for my 10-year-old niece who likes the idea of reading but has a hard time finishing a big book. Now here I would definitely go the route of recommending a middle grade book because they're already a lot easier to read and quicker to finish. My personal favorite is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. It just has that perfect tournament element, magical school element, and a very original setting with this town of Nevermore that is kind of Edgar Allan Poe inspired. Also would recommend this if you really like the show Wednesday on Netflix, which was another request because actually a lot of you guys asked for a book that reminds you of the Netflix show for Wednesday, and I have another book that is absolutely perfect. I do not believe that there's a book that's more perfect than this one, and that is We Have Always Lived in a Castle by Shirley Jackson. I recently read this. We follow our main character, Mary? Yeah, Mary. Good thing she tells us on literally the first sentence. Our main character, Mary, who has a very close bond with her sister, and she feels kind of out of place in this village where everyone is against them, but she also feels out of place in her family. She only has this strong bond with her sister, and our main character is pretty emo. Not in how she looks, but definitely in her thoughts. It just has that same feeling of kind of feeling excluded from everything, but still having the strong bond with your family. And I think if you like the Addams Family in general, or Wednesday, you would like We've Always Lived in a Castle. A book that feels like Barbie and the Nutcracker. Now this is a question I like and reminded me that I need to rewatch that movie really soon. This is probably a bit of an open door, but I would genuinely recommend The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by E.T.A. Hoffman, which is the story that the Barbie movie is inspired by. And it has a very similar feel to it. It has that same Christmas. I didn't even know that the original story was also this Christmas focused. We also meet the Mouse King, and there's a lot of battles. It's a little bit less frilly than the Barbie movies, of course. There's no Sugar Plum Fairy, but other than that, it's really fun to read the original story and kind of see where it deviates and where it is similar to Barbie and the Nutcracker. A book for someone who just got into dark academia and has read The Secret History. Now here, if you've read The Secret History, there's one book that I think is a great follow-up. I think for years people used to say if we were villains here, but now I would actually say, if I can find where it is in the pile of books next to me, Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a great follow-up to The Secret History because it almost mirrors the story. Although Babel, I think, contains a little less nuance and subtlety in the characters the way The Secret History does. It definitely doubles down on the academia part of it and the critiquing of academia and really diving super deep into those themes. As opposed to The Secret History, this one actually poses the question of when could it actually be okay to have violence happen. Just like last time, a lot of people requested a book for Ghibli fans, and I feel like there are tons of books that I could recommend. I don't want to recommend the same book, but I'll recommend another one this time. Ghibli movies derive a lot of their inspiration from folklore and have kind of this magical feel to them. Most of them do, at least. So I want to recommend The Girl and the Ghost. This one is inspired by Malaysian folklore and is about this young girl who befriends this ghostly spirits. And I feel like a lot of Ghibli movies also focus a lot on friendship and themes of friendship. So this one, definitely Ghibli vibes. A book for someone who loves Fleabag. Now, I feel like the most obvious choice here would be to recommend just one of those unhinged women books that are all over the internet and all over TikTok, like My Year of Rest and Relaxation and Sally Rooney, but I'm sure you've already heard of those. So instead I'm going to recommend something that is slightly different, but I think you would like it if you like Fleabag, and that is The Outsider by Albert Camus. I'm incapable of saying his name without going overly French, okay? Albert Camus. Camus. The Outsider by Albert Camus. It's more season 1 Fleabag, because here we follow a young man who murders someone and then just does not conform to society's expectations of how he should react. The entire book is the main character not conforming to what is expected of him in society's conventionality. And I think one of the appeals of Fleabag, at least to me personally, was just watching this woman completely going outside of what is expected from women in real life and also on TV, and that same kind of catharsis you can get from The Outsider, except the main character in this book takes it even further. Someone who cannot stop listening to Midnights by Taylor Swift. So Midnights by Taylor Swift is a concept album, right? It's about all the nights that Taylor Swift lay awake and the things that she was worrying about in those nights. So it's kind of difficult to find a book that completely captures the entire album, but I have one that I think comes a little bit close. And that is You and Me on Vacation, or People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. The reason I chose it is because it spans multiple years, and the vacation that our two main characters go on every single year. And every single year they have changed as a person, they learn new things about each other and about themselves. And to me this has that same vibe of going through each midnight and the things that were happening at that important midnight. In this book you're going through each summer and the important things that are happening each summer. And it's also a romance, so you know, Karma's not her boyfriend, it's actually the love interest of the book. A book for someone who is like women. So here I really want to recommend none other than Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which is literally just a book about women. It's mosaic storytelling, where in each short story we follow another woman in different time periods, from different religions, different backgrounds, different sexualities, and in the end a lot of the stories tie very neatly together, but the one thing that does already tie all the stories together is that they're all about Black women in the UK. A book for someone who has already read every dark academia book. I totally understand it. The weird thing about dark academia is that it's so popular, and yet there seems to be only a small pool of books that you can reach into to get your true dark academia stories, and a lot of people have already read all of the main recommendations, but there's one that I will keep talking about that somehow still has less than 10,000 ratings on Goodreads, so I'm yet again telling all of you to read this book. I've already gotten a lot of DMs from people telling me that they read this book because of me and that they loved it, so let this be your sign that you, yes you watching right now, should absolutely read These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever. It's peak dark academia. We follow these two young boys that feel very different from everyone else, but they're really just kind of a little bit pretentious as they go to university together, and then they form this very toxic, codependent relationship that eventually leads to very dark things. And oh, I already want to reread this amazing book. A book for climate activists who loves fantasy. This one was so easy. If you are someone who really cares about climate change and you want to read an epic fantasy series, you have to read the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This is my favorite fantasy series of all time. The first book is called The Fifth Season. It is a fantasy story where the villain, the main villain, is basically the Earth itself that is going just completely ballistic. There's apocalypse every 5th season, and we follow this woman as she is just trying to navigate life in this apocalyptic world that is trying to attack her. And the magic is like earth magic, and people can create earthquakes. It's super cool. The plot twist, oh my gosh. The storytelling, oh my gosh. The writing, unseen, never done before. Please read this. And in the spirit of a book gift ideas, someone asked for my favorite bookish accessory, and I would have to say that is definitely the book sleeve. Let me show. I only have one. Let me show it. Here we go. This one I got once in a fairy loot box, and I couldn't be happier with it. I will admit that I'm, as you can see, clearly not using it for a book, because it works as a protective sleeve for many things, and I'm currently using it to hold my drawing tablet. But it also works if you want to keep your books from getting damaged when you throw them into your bag. If you want to find a really nice one, I highly recommend going on Etsy and supporting a small business owner, because there are so many beautiful book sleeves designed or handmade by people on Etsy, so I highly recommend taking a look over there. A book for someone who's busy with life and wants to get back into reading. I think a lot of people can relate to this. It's difficult because, of course, different people like different genres, so different people are gonna get back into reading through different things. But the main thing that I can think of is something short and something very engaging and easy to read. So then I'm already very quickly going to young adult fantasy with not too much world building, because, you know, you're busy, so you don't want to have something difficult that you really have to get used to. And in such cases, I always recommend the Rebel of the Sands trilogy. This is just super fun, quick, high-paced, action-packed, high-stakes fantasy that takes place in a desert country. The main character is in fact not the chosen one, not the one to lead the rebellion, but just one of the wave and a part of this movement. And is it something absolutely special? No, but rarely have I had as much fun as I had with this series. A book for Hallmark lovers. Perfect for the holidays. And one book that I can think of that is ow, ooh, I pricked myself on my cactus. I have compared this book before to Disney, but actually Hallmark is another very, very great comparison, and that is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. It's cheesy, it's predictable, it's about witches falling in love. It's a good time, the same way a Hallmark movie can be a good time. You know, sometimes you just find comfort in cliches. A gift for someone who is a Nikolai Lantsov fan. So Nikolai Lantsov is a very famous character in the Grisha trilogy. He appears in the second book. If you like Nikolai Lantsov, you probably kind of like the idea of pirates and traveling and maps and compasses. So I found this really pretty necklace on Etsy that is Shadow and Bone themed and has a little compass in it, so I think that would be a very great gift. And also the official Grisha map, I think that would be a great gift as well. A book for someone who loved Mexican Gothic and wants more dark cottagecore. So if the thing that you loved in Mexican Gothic is, you know, these old buildings with nature taking over and running through it, I have to recommend the very boring book that I recommend in almost every video, but it is Uprooted by Naomi Novak. Evil forest taking over, main character learning how to use magic, a dark and villainous love interest. A book for me, who is a Sally Rooney and Gilmore Girls fan. I'm also a fan of both of those things, so that's perfect. So the book that I would recommend here is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Let me explain. It's a small town romance, although it's much more than a romance. It's more like a small town story, just like Gilmore Girls. And I noticed that Sally Rooney fans tend to really enjoy Emily Henry as well, probably because Emily Henry really likes to make her romances a little bit emotional as well. And a lot of her characters have kind of sad backstories, including this book also has these characters struggling with their youth, or more likely not being so young anymore, and I think that that will speak to a lot of Sally Rooney fans as well. A gift for someone who only reads manga. So I actually think a really cool gift that you can give someone who loves manga is something to make a manga wall. I will link a video in the description from Isabella from Throne of Pages. She has a manga wall, which is basically just a wall full of panels from her favorite mangas, and it looks super cool. She has a video talking about how she makes it. And I think that that could be a very cool thing to do if you like manga, or if you're looking for a gift for someone who really likes manga. A book for someone who is obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. So here I immediately think of a fantasy book that will have a lot of pages. So you can be lost in it for a very long time, that has a lot of world building that you can truly sink your teeth into, and that involves some kind of quest, some kind of traveling plot line. And then the one book that springs to mind here is Dune. Chances are if someone's really into Dungeons and Dragons, they've already read this one, but if they haven't, I think it's perfect. Stranger Things, but make it queer. So there's, for this one, I found one book that I haven't read myself, but I have heard about, and I felt like it fits the description so perfectly that I did want to talk about it. And that is Hell Followed With Us, where we follow a trans boy as a main character, and he's infected with this monster that is slowly taking over. Kind of reminded me of Will from Stranger Things, and he teams up with this other group of characters. They're all LGBT, and they need to stop Armageddon from happening. And when I read that synopsis, I was like, that makes me think of Stranger Things. A guy who only reads nonfiction and famous dystopian classics. So you need to put this man onto Ursula K. Le Guin. She is an amazing dystopian author that I feel like is pretty well known within the sci-fi communities, but not so much mentioned in the same vein as, you know, all the famous dystopian authors like George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, even though I fully believe that she deserves to be in there. Now, she's read a lot about all kinds of different themes, so if you are looking for a book from her or as a gift, go through all of her books and find a theme that you know will fit the person that you're buying the book for. But if you want to read specifically about hierarchy and equality, I recommend picking up The Dispossessed by her. A book for a fan of true enemies to lovers romance, not just rivals, high stakes enemies. I totally feel you on this one. Every time I read an enemies to lovers book, very often I'm like, I wish they were more enemies. Now there's a book that I recently read, an entire series, where I finally got that feeling. I will take it. I have the entire box set, so I kind of have to take it off my bookshelf. Here we go. The Folk of the Air, The Cruel Prince. Even though the enemies to lovers plotline is secondary to the main plotline, which is more political intrigue and spying and fae, the enemies to lovers plotline in this is true enemies that will bully each other, degrade each other, betray each other. Finally. Now, I'm sure there's many of you watching right now that are like, I've already read The Cruel Prince. Good thing there's another prompt, and that was someone who really likes The Cruel Prince and wants more fantasy enemies to lovers. Now here, I would recommend Fortuna Sworn. And it truly feels like a more adult version of The Cruel Prince. It's just like The Cruel Prince, except a little bit more violent, and the main character and the enemy. There's more camaraderie between them and are not fully enemies. It's more like a hate to love thing, but the entire thing has the same feeling as The Cruel Prince. A book for a type of person who tries to accommodate to everyone. I have a theory that people who tend to accommodate to everyone are the exact type of people who love those unhinged women books because it's cathartic. So I'd actually recommend Iron Widow, because this is about a female main character standing up against a regime that tells her that she can't do certain things because she is a woman, she is rude, she is outspoken, she's forward, and therefore she ends up fighting these like mechanic alien robots. Very cool. A book that gives Genshin Impact vibes. Now, I am someone who actually really enjoys playing Genshin Impact. I haven't played in a while, but I do really like it. And when I think of Genshin Impact, I think of open world, elemental magic system, and tons of different fun characters. And a book series that fits that description is the A Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. This one has elemental magic, a very cool world where people can jump between different colored versions of London, and every version has different levels of magic in it. And we follow a ton of really fun characters. This series will get you addicted just like the game will. A book to learn something new. I would recommend the little introducing series. I have one called Introducing Postmodernism, but they have introducing pretty much every single concept that you can think of. Whether you want to learn about quantum mechanics or feminism, there's an introduction book from this introducing series. So if you want to learn something new, these are really great. Oh, and they're kind of graphic. So they explain these things using a lot of like little comics and graphics, and it's really fun. A book for a boyfriend who loves Game of Thrones and Aragon. So this person is clearly really into epic fantasy, and anyone who's really into epic fantasy I would put onto Brandon Sanderson, because Brandon Sanderson is definitely known to have the hearts of all of the epic fantasy fans. He writes very accessible, fast-paced books with great plot twists, so I think that is a great introductory book. A gift for existential dread lovers. Well, when I think of existential dread, I think of existentialism, and when I think of existentialism, I think, of course, of the father of the existentialist philosophy, and that is Jean-Paul Sartre. And he wrote, see, here I go again with the French, Jean-Paul Sartre. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it in a normal way. But he wrote Nausea, which is basically about this man who just kind of like walks around town having an existential crisis. And he and he describes the world as he experiences it while having an existential crisis. Very thrilling stuff. A gift for a Six of Crows fan. Well, if you are a Six of Crows fan, or you have someone in your life who's a Six of Crows fan, you have to go to Etsy and find them one of those really cool decorative knives or daggers, or very cool dagger earrings, which you can also find on Etsy. Then a gift for someone who's a Sarah J Maas fan. Now, I will say that Sarah J Maas is the author that I have seen the most beautiful creative fan art for on Instagram and on TikTok. So if you go to Etsy and you find some really cool art print of a Sarah J Maas story, I think that will be a great gift. And then generally, for any fandom, you can find bookish inspired candles. I know Novel Wix is great if you want shipping from the US, and if you want shipping from the UK, there is Grace and Honey. A lot of you guys asked for books that felt similar to Zelda or similar to Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I'm going to split the two because I feel like they're kind of different. If you want a book that feels like the original Zelda with like the dungeons and stuff, I would recommend The Gilded Wolves trilogy by Roshni Chokshi. This is my favorite YA fantasy series. Reading these books feels like going through these old Zelda dungeons, because the characters have to constantly solve these puzzles and get out of buildings that feel like temples, and there are all these booby traps and things, and there's like a boss fight at the end. feels just like a Zelda dungeon. And then if you're looking for something that feels like Zelda Breath of the Wild, so it's more open world, more spiritual, there is The Priory of the Orange Tree, because in this one you follow different characters in completely different areas of this world. So it almost feels like you yourself are kind of exploring this world through these characters that are in different places. And there's a very strong theme of dragons. Reading this book really felt like the music that you hear in Zelda Breath of the Wild whenever a dragon comes along. A book that feels like listening to Mitski. I love that you asked this because Mitski is one of my favorite artists. It's hard to capture her music, but whenever I listen to her, I feel so seen. And I also feel frustrated with being a woman. The book that I would recommend here is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This book is oddly relatable despite being 100 years old. It deals with the struggles of women, and just like a lot of Mitski songs, the book feels kind of trippy. And I think the song by Mitski that fits the best here is Washing Machine Heart. A more cozy, feel-good alternative to dark academia books. You know, sometimes you just don't want it to be too dark academia, and here I would recommend Truly Devious if you want that cozy boarding school feeling. Now there is a murder in this one. It is a murder mystery, but it never really gets super dark. All the side characters are very funny, almost cartoonish, and to me the story definitely felt more funny than scary or thrilling. A book for someone who loved the Hunger Games and dystopian books back in the day. If you love dystopian YA back in the day, of course I would highly recommend going for the classic dystopians. I'll spare you the basic answers like 1984 and Brave New World. So a more recent one that I read that I would recommend is The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a short story, so super easy to get into if you haven't been reading for a while, and it poses a lot of super interesting ethical questions about utilitarianism. A book for someone who relates to You're on Your Own Kid by Taylor Swift. That's my favorite song of the album. This one was difficult and a little bit vibe based, but the book that I come up with is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, because I do feel like Taylor Swift's lyric writing, especially in You're on Your Own Kid, feels a little bit stream of consciousness, the same way Virginia Woolf talks. And there's one lyric from the song that just really reminded me of Virginia Woolf, and that is the part, I think it's the bridge, where she's like, I hosted parties and starved my body. I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this. Feels like Mrs. Dalloway. There's another part of this book that doesn't focus on Mrs. Dalloway, that is very, very dark side plot that doesn't necessarily fit You're on Your Own Kid, but the song itself has kind of a dark feel to it. So I'm gonna say that it fits anyway. A book that gives you the shivers. Maybe a bit of a cop-out, but Junji Ito, specifically his anthology Shiver that I recently read. It's very difficult for books to really make me scared or give me the shivers, but because this is graphic novel or just manga with a lot of body horror, drawings of body horror, yeah, that definitely gave me the shivers. A gift for a secret history fan. Well, to all of the dark academia or secret history fans in your life, you should just look up on Etsy, just search dark academia, and you're gonna find so many art prints that the artists have just tagged as dark academia. And there's so many amazing things to choose from there. Another really cool idea is making or ordering a custom made Ex Libris stamp with their name on it, which I think is a very cool dark academia, a very personalized gift as well. A book for my sister who likes anime and is a concept artist. I would highly recommend gifting someone those concept art books of their favorite animated movie. I know that almost every Ghibli movie has its own concept art book, and I've always wanted one of those. I think these are great for all the animated movie fans and artists in your life. And lastly, a book that feels like a Tim Burton movie. Here I'm going to recommend the short stories by Edgar Allan Poe. I wouldn't be surprised if Tim Burton is very inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. It's really just the vibes that are similar, right? Both Tim Burton movies and Edgar Allan Poe stories have a scary vibe without ever truly being that scary at all. But they just have that dark vibe to it. Every time I read an Edgar Allan Poe story, it plays out in black and white in my mind somehow. Kind of very desaturated, the same way Tim Burton movies are very desaturated. I hope you found a new book that you want to read. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me. I hope you had a wonderful day, and I hope to see you soon in another video very soon. Goodbye!